Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'm going solo to recap the latest episode of Star Wars Rebels, The Lost Commanders. And hopefully we'll be having a normal two-person podcast next week, but for now I'm going to be taking it solo on video on YouTube as well as on our audio version. So if you're listening on audio, you can check out the YouTube link in the video description, although it's just me looking at the camera talking. I don't think I have time to put in any graphics or anything. I recently recapped the season 1 of Star Wars Rebels on our YouTube channel. Search for Overly Animated YouTube, or overlyanimated.com is where you can find all our links. And for our YouTube channel or Tumblr, Twitter. So I caught up very recently with the show. It's very good. I hadn't seen it before, and now we're going to be covering it week to week on the Overly Animated Podcast. If you're new to the podcast, we cover a variety of animated shows. We take animation seriously, and we recap Gravity Falls, Steven Universe, Moonbeam City, and now Star Wars Rebels regularly. So I'm going to be getting into this, The Lost Commanders, and next week we'll probably have an audio-only version of each episode of Rebels like normal. But for now, let me get into The Lost Commanders. The premiere of season 2, although we had the Siege movie in between the seasons, so I don't know if that counts as the beginning of season 2 or not. This definitely seems like a continuation of that movie we had in the middle. And this was definitely a step down in terms of excitement from the previous installment of this series. It was still good. That doesn't necessarily correlate to quality. I wasn't necessarily expecting such a quiet premiere, or the first part of a 2-part premiere. That's kind of interesting. The entire kind of episode I was waiting for, the Empire to arrive, and we definitely didn't get that. We just got kind of a quiet episode with a lot of connections to Clone Wars, which here's the unfortunate part. I have not seen the Clone Wars series. That was not a problem for most of season 1. It was very tangentially related, not many direct connections until Ashoka showed up, and now this episode, I assume, is fairly related. I think Rex might be a character on there, but it's not something that I'm aware of or familiar with. But I don't think that's vitally important to this series. That's kind of what I would want to. I think it's more important to see how the characters within Star Wars Rebels react to the previous situations and things that are brought up from the universe's past, rather than things being brought up again and having old things return. Like, I think it's more important that Kanan has a lot of backstory here, and we see kind of flaws in Kanan almost for the first time. And seeing how that affects, all the characters around him, rather than, literally what his past was. And I think we learn a lot new about Kanan, that he fought in the Clone Wars. He's like, I wasn't a commander, I didn't have these ranks, but it was still something that was very much a part of his past. And he brings these prejudices against the clones in. And this seems fairly, at first it seems a little jarring, because the character of Kanan is one that seems very moral, very caring about others. His entire purpose is kind of to help out others against the Empire. And, as a Jedi, that's also a big part of that. So seeing him, have a natural prejudice against Rex and his two fellow clones it's very jarring to see. I like it. It brings a lot of depth to Kanan that I previously hadn't had. Kanan's always been one of the stronger elements of this show, and seeing him kind of for the first time add some backstory and depth to his character is very refreshing and very nice. Unfortunately, Hera kind of gets sidelined again. That's another character I'd really like to see more out of. I know nothing about Hera, and it's not easy to be super sympathetic to her when I have no idea what her past is. I don't really know much about her other than she's crew mom for a little bit. But it's not. But then she gets silent here along with Chopper, who I'm fine with not being in the main adventure. I feel like we had a little too much Chopper in this show, and I would like to focus more on the other characters. I'm surprised I've gotten to almost 5 minutes in this podcast without mentioning that Zabine's hair color is different. That was the first thing I noticed about Rebels this season. I'm pretty sure that her hair was not different in the Siege movie, but it's definitely like it was in the first season. It was like purple and orange, and now it's blue and green. Oh man, what a big what a big development in Star Wars Rebels. Yeah, that's definitely the biggest thing that happened in this. Actually, it might be the biggest thing that happened in this episode. Everything that's big about this episode kind of happened last installment. So I mean, what's the discussion? If I had a co-host here, I would throw it. What do you think of Sabine's new hair color? I don't like. I mean, it's not that I don't like it. I liked the old one better. How about that? It's, by the way, speaking of underdeveloped characters, Sabine, she kind of had the focus in one episode with Hera. That was one of the worst installments of the first season, and I would love to see more. To hear, we kind of get a brief backstory of Sabine in one of the episodes that she was in the Empire's Academy and stuff like that, and I'd like to see more about her. I think something good that happens with her in the first season is that she didn't turn into Ezra's love interest as like I think that would have been very one note for a character, but that not happening would usually mean that she turns into a real character with more depth than what she had. I think she's very good in her actions relating to the crew and what happens. I think some of her best moments in the first season were kind of her and her like banter with Ezra. I think that's been some of the most sympathetic things that we've seen there. But not sympathetic, most kind of interesting and distinctive things about Sabine. Here, Sabine, again, is kind of relegated to, the mechanic and doesn't have much to do. But let's go through... Those are kind of brief initial thoughts. I'm not used to constantly talking, by the way, which is why I'm kind of all over the place here. Let's go through things that happen in this episode. Sorry if I'm not looking at the camera. I'm looking at my notes on screen. So we see Commander Sato's hologram after the events of the Siege of Lothal. Commander Sato kind of not separated from Ahsoka and the rest of Ahsoka. I feel like one of the characters calls her Ahsoka here, but Ahsoka separated from her and the crew of the Ghost. So I'm interested to see what Commander Sato's role will be this season, because it was very striking to see him introduced in Siege of Lothal and to see him kind of be this force commanding the Ghost, because that's kind of one of the trademark characteristics of the Ghost crew is that they don't really have leaders. If anyone's a leader, it's Hera, and she's more of a presence that fights along with them and not necessarily someone that is, barking orders at them, who's just this figurehead from above. And that's kind of what Commander Sato is here. And so I'm interested to see if they take the role of what he was in the beginning of this, and he's just someone who speaks off camera the entire time, like he just randomly shows up as a hologram. Like I feel like that's maybe a good decision. It drives plot, and it keeps his presence kind of relegated so we can focus on the characters we care about in this show. That might be a good decision. So he says that they need to, or I don't know if he says this, but they need to, it's like he talks and Ahsoka talks. They need to establish a base. They need more allies. Ahsoka says there's a military commander of the Outer Rim, a previous one, and they need to find him. And while they do that, Ahsoka's going to be looking into the Sith Master from the Siege of Lothal. So that was a big moment that I talked about this in my video review of Siege of Lothal. Like one of the biggest moments of that, like kind of the climax of it, is Ahsoka figuring out who Darth Vader is, and that's really kind of it's something that you would expect this show to struggle with, is how do you relate, how do you balance keeping the show on one hand in universe, right? Not in one hand related to the rest of the Star Wars universe and have big moments related to the rest of everything else, like in the movies, the other shows, even the books. Disney's completely expanding Star Wars now, right? So keeping it tied to all it. I'll mention that in an article I read in another minute. And balancing that with, this is an individual show. So we need to keep big plot things that happen, big plot elements related to the characters in the show. So I thought it was a little bit strange to see kind of this big moment in Siege of Lothal be related to some character from the Clone Wars and Darth Vader, who's not a presence in the show until the very end. of last season and the movie, and to see that moment be related here. So that was basically the big dramatic moment was not related to the events of the show here, and I think that's not where you want to be. It maybe it works if it's like in a separate force, like that installment was kind of separate from the season. Maybe in between the season movie, that's okay. So I like the decision in this episode to have her deal with Darth Vader off screen. It's interesting because fans of Star Wars are going to see this as maybe one of the maybe much more interesting than the proceedings of this episode. I definitely think that would be more interesting than them going fishing. But I don't want to see that. I want to see it how it relates to the characters we know, the crew of the Ghost. That's what's important for Star Wars Rebels, and that's how you're going to achieve quality episodes in this show. So I think that's a good decision out of the bait. I'm not sure how they're going to handle Ashoka the rest of the season. It's interesting. Like, what is this character who was a big part of Clone Wars? Again, I haven't seen Clone Wars, but that's not this show. And for most of season 1, they stayed contained within Star Wars Rebels. So how are they going to? And now she's here, and she's part of the main crew of the rebellion. It's kind of the entire point of the show that's forming. So how are they going to relate Ashoka to the rest of that? I mentioned a brief side note. I read a very good article on EW interviewing Dave Filoni, one of the creators of the show. If you search for Star Wars Rebels, Darth Vader's Shadow, Entertainment Weekly, I think you'll find the article. And the interviewer is mostly interested in how Rebels relates to the rest of the Star Wars universe. Kind of what you would expect. It's like, so how do you deal with the movies, and how do you make sure that your straws don't get crossed and stuff like that? And it's a little tiring when I want questions on Rebels itself. And see, that's how I feel like that's how a lot of people who aren't going to watch the show week to week are going to review Rebels. It's like, there's this kind of self-contained plot here, and how's it's going to relate to what's going on. And basically Dave Filoni's like, it doesn't really relate. And there's the second move, although if anything is going to relate, it's going to be the second relate, as in they have to worry about mixing up plot developments and stuff. If there is anything that's going to relate, it's going to be the prequel, or I don't know, using prequel in this universe is not a good idea. The kind of spin-off movie that's second, which is going to take place, I think, between the prequels and originals, much like this series. So that's the one they have to be concerned about, if anything. Whereas the most recent movie coming up is after the originals, right? So that's not something that's even in the same timeline as this show. So I would check out that article. It's very interesting. But anyway, back to the events of this episode, I guess. Like I mentioned, there's a lot happening here that's not super interesting, in my opinion. I think that I might have a different view of this episode had I been a Clone Wars fan, because I think a lot of the clone stuff that happens kind of has a different weight tied to it, if it relates to that series. However, for me, I bring an interesting perspective on this, not having seen Clone Wars, but having seen the rest of Star Wars stuff. So to me, all the Clone Wars talk was not super significant with Rex and stuff. Like I said, I like how it related to Kanan's backstory, and seeing how Ezra, reacted to all that, and how Hera reacted to all that. I loved the scene where the hologram of Hera talked to Kanan, and Hera's like, these clones saved my life. You should maybe be more tolerant towards them. And Kanan's like, I'll try. I thought that was a very good scene, even though we're kind of doing this weird thing where we're just throwing out, backstory that didn't previously exist into scenes where we're trying to establish an emotional connection. That's not something that you generally want to do. However, here I liked it because I like when we do things with Hera, who we have not done much with in the show, and I like the bond between Hera and Kanan. A lot of times that bond is solely kind of this sexual tension bond. And for a while, the show, it seemed like it was kind of hinting at this kind of sinister element to Hera, where it's like Kanan's trapped by his, affections for seeming affections for Hera, and maybe, and like, oh, she knows everything. Kanan doesn't know everything. Maybe that's something that's going to come and bite Kanan in the butt, and we're all sympathetic to him, and we're questioning of Hera, and I do like that the series did kind of a heel turn on that subversion, where Hera just had their best interests at heart, but she was trying to protect them by keeping them in the dark, right? So now Hera's character is trying to gain more depth rather than just being this kind of potential distraction for Kanan. I don't like the sexism ties in that anyway, and I think this is better for both of their characters. So I like the progress we make here. Let's see what else happens this episode on my show notes. Big note about Sabine's hair color change. That was the big highlight for me. They go onto this planet. They have this thing with the old droid who says the numbers, and that's how I identify Rex. They like connect to him, his birth numbers. Captain 501st Clone Battalion. Then there's Gregor and Wolf, and of course, we have the whole main plot of the episode, where the one of them is mistrusting, and he goes out on his own, and he betrays them, and then you learn that at the end. You're kind of wondering, you're kind of left to think, oh, maybe all three of them betrayed it, but no, it's just Wolf. As you can tell from my kind of not great tone about that, this is a plot that is very frequent in shows. This is what I would call a very tropey plot. It's not, that doesn't mean they shouldn't do it, but it just means it's tiresome, especially this one, which I've definitely seen before. So I wasn't thrilled with that. I'm one that never predicts things happening in shows, because I purposely try to have a mindset where I watch shows only thinking what's happening in the moment. I feel like that's IMO. It's a better way to view media, is to not try to think ahead and outsmart the writers. Just go along with it. That way you can experience what they're trying to get you to experience, rather than to try to outsmart them and say, ooh, I predicted the twist, but that being said, there's nothing to predict. Wolf, it was obvious this is what was happening. There was a little bit of doubt whether it was all three of them or just Wolf. But once you identify the trope, if you've seen enough media with that trope, it's just on course from there. That wasn't super exciting. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't super exciting for me. Also, not super exciting in this episode is the kind of 5-minute sequence with them trying to catch the Jupa, who apparently loves Lisettes, and he calls, I don't remember what the other one calls, Gregor, I think, calls the Jupa the entire time. It turns out it's this giant kind of worm creature. To me, it looks like a worm with a U, W-U-R-M from Magic the Gathering, but no one's gonna get that. And it almost eats. They seemed kind of chill about Zeb being the bait. That's what I would have to say about that. Why were they not more concerned for Zeb? Because it seems like there's a high chance of Zeb dying, but they're like, oh, it's fine. So Rex and Greg were like, oh, it's fine, so I guess we're going to trust them. And Zeb, turns out okay at the end. I guess that's fine. And he was kind of mad, and then he instantly is placated by them saying, oh, Zeb, good job. You caught him on your own. That's the biggest one we've ever seen. So just by touching Zeb's by building up Zeb's pride, you can get him to be that forgiving. Zeb is one of the better established characters on the show, despite us not having seen him much at the end of last season. He was a super big force in the first half of the season. So seeing him now, so his actions now, even if we don't have to focus on him, I think make a lot of sense now. And I think this kind of did fit along with his character. We've seen him as someone whose anger can be easily placated. Though this is kind of the biggest example of that. Like, right, it's just, oh, he's fooling around with Ezra, and Ezra hurts him or something, and he's just quick to forgive. But here, he's almost dead, and then he's very quick to forgive if you build up his ego. So. Touching, I think we're pushing the boundaries of realism with Zeb's character, and that, I guess, is my point. Although although to the credit of the show, you can do things like that when you build up a character like that, like they did with Zeb. So what else do we have? So yeah, in general, the fishing stuff was not very interesting. Although it was also not, it also wasn't long enough that it completely lost me. I will say that I sometimes get lost by super long, uninteresting action sequences. This though was fine. As much as this episode had no super big elements that interested me in it much, it was fun. None of it also distanced me too much. That's kind of something I've found to be true with the show. Even the weakest episodes are still good, and that's a very good place you want to be in a show. Shows can lose you when they turn out bad installments. This show, I don't think, has had any bad installments. It has had. I also don't think it's had like the best episode I've ever seen installments. Like I loved the finale, and I loved 5 other episodes last season, but they don't compare to, some of the best episodes of Steven Universe or other incredible shows on TV. But that's okay. This was this show's first season, and now we're getting to the second season. You might expect a quality increase. That being said, we're keeping with this kind of consistently good quality, so I am a fan of that. Let's see what else I have on the show notes. We saw a brief return of Agent Callus, aka the least interesting villain. He's the first villain we met for the Empire, and he's kind of our entry point. We know the characters can easily outmatch Agent Callus, so he's not he's not a threat. That's the thing. And they know that, right? Because then the Inquisitor very quickly stepped up last season, and the Inquisitor was great. I love Jason Isaacs as the Inquisitor, and I'm excited for the new Inquisitor this season. If you haven't heard, voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar. That's going to be very interesting. I can't wait to see that because I don't want to see any more Agent Callus. I hope next episode, which is the continuation of this, like obviously we're going to have big action pieces with the Empire coming. I hope the Inquisitor comes and not just Agent Callus, because although Agent Callus is turning into like the villain that he's like, he's kind of sympathetic, right? He's unthreatening. He's we kind of feel for him as he's constantly berated for his failures by people higher up in the villainous bureaucracy, and so he's fine. It's fine. His role in this was fine because it was 2 seconds, but we don't need an episode focused on Agent Callus just as the main antagonist again. In my opinion, we had the things with the clones and the control trips. Again, I think in relating to this series, this backstory not as important as how our characters relate to that. We see that probe. This is a good example of Star Wars Rebels containing its own little bubble of Star Wars mythology within the show. I've talked about this in my video reviews of season 1, which again you can check out on our YouTube channel. And I love how the season 1 stayed within Lothal for almost the entire season. That to me is such a good choice because you have a show with such an expansive mythology as Star Wars, and you can get lost in it, especially for a show that's supposed to be contained within a set group of characters. You can get lost within this vast mythology. We have a point that we can relate to in the planet of Lothal, and it's great because we stay focused on that and we don't get other planets, and like this episode, like half the episode is like, who are these new characters, who's the planet, and it's not focusing on our characters as much. But when we focused on Lothal, there was we were able to focus on our characters and the plot surrounding them. So I was talking about the probe. The probe is something that we established last season. I'm not the biggest knowledgeable Star Wars person. Like, I've seen all the movies. I haven't seen Clone Wars again. I've seen all the movies and I love them, but I'm not gonna be able to identify different types of probes, maybe even different types of Empire vessels and stuff like that. So this probe is something that was established in I think the third to last episode last season of something as being very dangerous. So when we see it doing its stuff here and like taking over the computer and kind of single-handedly presenting a threat, it makes sense because it was established last season that this single probe was so dangerous as opposed to a lot of other enemy things that wouldn't be dangerous on their own. Even one stormtrooper would be much less dangerous than this one probe. Stormtroopers are just incompetent in the show. Probably everywhere too, but especially, maybe, I don't know if it's especially here. I need to cross-check my Star Wars stuff here to see if that's a discussion maybe I'll have with Miller, Delaney, whoever's co-hosting, hopefully next week with me. Where are stormtroopers are the most incompetent? No stormtroopers this episode though. So that probe does stuff. Yeah, what else happens? Checking the show notes. This planet is Silos, I think, by the way. That's not significant to me, but might be to you, who knows more about stuff than I do. We had the entire stuff with Catching Norm, which I already talked about, and we had the kind of the reconciliation at the end. Rex redeems them in kind of Kanan's eyes and shoots the thing, although Kanan's still upset at the end, and we'll see how he reacts to it. The Phantom engine took a direct hit, so they're stranded, and the Empire is on its way. So that's that kind of where we are at the end. And then they had a preview from next time, which seems like a giant fight with the Empire. Seemingly some type of Empire vessels we have not yet seen in Rebels, I think. I'm not completely sure about that, though. So that's what we have to look forward to. Overall, this episode was one of the weaker entries in Rebels, in my opinion. That being said, I don't think it was bad. I think it was fine. And I liked a lot of the character moments we have. Like, I think we're on the right track with Kanan backstory. Like, I love that. And I want to see more of that with, I want to see Ezra's parents. I want to see Sabine's school days. I want to see I know nothing about Hera. Where is Hera from? I want to see stuff with that. Maybe some Zeb, kind of an emotional backstory episode with him and the other Lasats, maybe stuff like that. So that's kind of where I am at with this. I'm interested to see how this season is structured. We haven't met the Inquisitor yet. We haven't kind of seen how our little crew of the Ghost, as I talked about earlier, is going to function within the context of a larger rebellion now. So that's kind of where I'm interested in. So let me know your thoughts, either by contacting us through one of the many ways on overlyanimated.com or commenting on the YouTube page for this video on what you think of my thoughts on this. And next time we'll be covering episode 2 next week, the continuation of this, hopefully in a 2-person format, although this was better than I thought it'd be. I talked for 26 minutes. Wow, that is a long time of talking on my own. I need some water. So overlyanimated.com. I'm Dylan Hysen. You can learn more there, and you can support us at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons: Shayna, Mitch, Cordell, Beatrice, Nate, Andy, and Jamie, aka Hayna, Fever Mitch, Cordell University, Beach Exchange, Buzz Lightyear, and Mailman. And we need your support on the Patreon to continue doing 4 podcasts a week like we're currently doing now. So more Star Wars Rebels coverage to come. Thanks for watching. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on the audio version, you could subscribe to go to our YouTube and subscribe anyway. Hopefully we'll have more video content like that in the future. Maybe some more cross-listed audio and video podcasts like this. I think that's a good idea. So we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.